Chapter 7. "Arilla, look!" Arosa whispered as she floated above the men. "I want to ride on it." "What does it do?" Arilla asked as she gazed in excitement at all the colorful displays. "There are the Dragonlings. I want to go play with them." "You go to them. I want to ride on the moving transport. I've been watching Cara. It looks like so much fun, especially when it goes up to the ceiling and back down very fast," Arosa replied. "Go have fun on your ride," Arilla said with a wave of her hand. "I'm going down to see what the Dragonlings are doing. They are trying to catch something, it looks like." Arosa nodded, turning back to where the men sat trying to get the machine to work. She knew the women were there. She had seen them up in the area where all the controls were for the playground. Dissolving into a fine mist, she moved swiftly down to the cart as it began to move. Just before she reached it, the cavern was plunged into darkness. She swept past one of the carts, brushing one of the men before she settled into the last one and partially reformed. Arilla smiled as the babies gathered around her as she settled down on the ground next to them. A soft laugh escaped her when Phoenix crawled into her lap and looked up at her with brilliant dark brown eyes. "Hello, little one," Arilla whispered as she gently stroked the soft, black feathers covering Phoenix. "What are you and the others doing?" Phoenix rubbed her snout against Arilla's gold cheek before she turned and hopped back over to where Simba and the other symbiots lit the ground with a soft light. Wiggling her tail, she waited. Arilla laughed as Phoenix and Spring and the other Dragonlings, plus Rome, tried to pounce on the heads popping up out of the ground. Whenever they were successful, a stream of warm water would spray them. Arilla shimmered for a moment before she changed into a small golden dragon that resembled Phoenix, only she was covered in gold feathers. With a giggle, she joined in the fun. "I'm telling you, something touched me," Haven snapped as he strained to move the bar. He was about to make it dissolve when thousands of twinkling lights lit the cavern. "What the—" "That is the same thing Traylon said earlier," Fox commented in a distracted voice as he looked up at the ceiling with a frown. "Are those stars?" "It looks like it, but that is impossible," Zoran said from the front. "What is that?" Mandra shuddered as dozens of glowing orange eyes appeared. "I don't know," he replied in a gruff voice. "It looks like something Ariel would bring home, though." "They're moving closer," Haven said. "Either that or we are." "I'm pretty sure it's both," Mandra replied, trying to shrink down in the seat as the large bodies of the spiders suddenly started to glow and their mouths opened and closed as they crawled down the web spread out across the tracks. "Don't kill them," he added in a rough voice. "Why not?" Traylon asked desperately as he felt for the knife he usually carried. "Because they are probably Ariel's new pets," Mandra groaned, and closed his eyes as he slid sideways against Keelan as they passed underneath the chomping creatures. "You can sit up now," Keelan informed Mandra once they were clear. "Just sit in the cart. I want to see what happens." "You have been around Trisha and Paul too long," Creon muttered as the carts turned in a curve to the left. "What is that, Traylon?" "I don't know," Traylon said in exasperation as he realized that he had left his knife back in his living quarters. "I think Ariel must have left half her pets here," Zoran muttered under his breath as more eyes started to appear as they entered a thick forest. "What is that sound? Why are they asking us who?" "You were as bad as the twins," Traylon retorted. "I don't know what type of creatures they are or why they are asking us who. Maybe they want to know our names." "I am Zoran Rykill," Zoran called out. He waited a few seconds, but the creatures just kept saying the same thing over and over. "Tell them your names as well." "I am Traylon Rykill," Traylon called out. "They just keep saying the same thing." "Well, maybe they need to know that Vox Droja, king of the Seraphim, is here," Vox said loudly. A snicker behind him had him glancing over his shoulder at Keelan. "What is so funny?" "I didn't laugh," Keelan replied, raising his hands off the bar. "Don't look at me," Mandra said with a shake of his head. "I already know who you are." Vox's head whipped around when a low snarl and glowing yellow eyes sounded from the woods next to him. A loud hiss escaped him when 5 beasts covered in dark gray hair that stood up on the backs of their necks stepped out from between several of the trees. He shifted before he was aware of what he was doing. "Bloody Seraphim," Haven cursed, as he suddenly found himself plastered between the side of the cart and a pile of hissing fur. "Vox, shift back before you crush me!" Vox's eyes were frozen on the ghostly shape of the 4-legged creatures. He swiped his massive paw at one when it came close enough, but it went right through the creature. The one furthest to the left suddenly stopped, and a loud howl filled the cavern. Vox didn't change back until he felt a sharp tug on his tail. He turned and glared at Haven, who was glaring back at him. Settling in the seat, he glanced back over his shoulder as a shudder ran through his body. "What was that?" Haven asked Vox in an aggravated voice. "You usually don't just shift like that, do you?" "No, not since I was a young cub," Vox muttered in a rough voice. "There was something about those creatures that pulled my cat out." "Well, next time it happens, get out of the cart first," Haven snapped. "You almost crushed me, and I didn't like having your ass in my face." "It looks like we're coming out of the forest," Creon interrupted, pointing between Keelan and Mandra. "Look, the tracks are moving up." "Mandra, your mate needs some serious help with picking her pets," Vox called out over his shoulder. "I don't like those last ones. I think you should kill those beasts. At least you could use their fur." "What's the matter, Vox? Need a new jacket for your mate already?" Keelan chuckled. "I don't like half of them, but if it makes her happy, I live with it. By the way, you are not making any coats out of my mate's pets," Mandra replied, with a hard tap to the back of Vox's head. "Why does everyone keep bringing that up?" Vox complained as the carts moved in a wide circle around what looked like a miniature mountain face complete with snow. Strange, black flying creatures sat at different points, making cawing noises and snapping their beaks at them. "I thought the jackets were alive. I was just trying to protect Riley. How was I supposed to know the hideous thing was a piece of clothing?" "I don't know about you, but my dragon is sending out a warning," Traylon muttered in concern as they climbed higher. "Mine too," Creon called out, wrapping his hands around the bar in front of him. "I don't sense any danger, just a feeling of anticipation." "As long as there aren't any more of those beasts back there at the top, I'm good," Vox commented. "This is actually enjoyable," Keelan added as he sat back. "My dragon isn't worried at all." Traylon wasn't feeling as confident as his brother. He couldn't put his finger on it, but something was bothering his dragon. He reached inside and saw that his dragon was burrowing down as if to weather one of the violent storms that sometimes formed on their world. "Wow, did you see that?" Keelan muttered, as he gazed at the ceiling as the cart came to a stop at the very top of the miniature mountain. "Traylon, I think your mate was messing with the environmental system again." Traylon's eyes swept across the sky above them. Large bolts of lightning and swirling clouds darkened the area above their heads. A fierce stream of wind blew on them as they sat near the ceiling of the cavern. He lowered his eyes to gaze out over the cavern. They were in a far corner of it. From the angle they were stopped at, it gave them a view of the entire underground area. "This is incredible," he murmured out loud. "The planning that went into this, not to mention the engineering, is unbelievable." "I see the forest with those hairy beasts moving through it," Vox said in unease. "Look over there," Zoran groaned, pointing to another section where the faint sound of laughter could be heard above the rising storm and the loud cawing of the birds. "Abby is going to kill me." "How did they get out?" Traylon muttered as he saw Amber and Jade's distinctive dragons running through a section and disappearing inside a building. "There is something on top of the building." "Traylon?" Zoran said in a low voice. "I saw something moving down there," Traylon growled. "Something that I've never seen before." "There have been a lot of things I've never seen before," Haven commented, as he winced as another bolt of lightning flashed close by and the carts they were in shook. Am I the only one who thinks being up high is not a good idea? I don't think that is going to be a problem, Zoran muttered grimly as his hands tightened around the bar in front of him. I suggest everyone hold on. Traylon finally looked down to where Zoran was staring as the carts began to move again. Now he understood the apprehension his dragon was feeling. As the lightning flashed again, he could clearly see that the tracks appeared to end right in front of them. A loud curse escaped him as he suddenly felt the cart start to fall. Haven, Keelan, and Creon's voices rose with his as they sped downward in a freefall that left his stomach back at the top of the mountain. Laughter exploded from him as the carts suddenly twisted and turned. They passed through a tunnel with flashing lights and strange ghostly faces before they were back out into the cavern, and a large splash of warm water covered them as they found themselves suddenly floating in the river. I want to do that again, Zoran yelled as he wiped the water from his face and twisted in his seat. That was almost as good as being in my dragon form and flying. Did you see the cave? Mandra chuckled. I jumped when the lights came on. I loved the twists and turns, another unfamiliar voice said next to Creon. Traylon twisted around to see who it was. Creon was cursing, low at first, then louder as he finally pushed the bar holding him up, and he half jumped, half fell out of the back of the cart into the water. It wasn't long before Traylon was the only one still sitting in the cart. Some type of braking system must have engaged when the bar lifted because the cart stopped moving. His mouth opened and closed as the ghostly golden figure of a beautiful woman rose up and floated toward him. He cleared his throat, and his eyes flashed to where the others were climbing up onto the bank. His eyes shifted back, and he twisted until he was standing in front of the cart. What are you? He asked warily as it hovered in front of him. Boo, Arosa said, switching forms. Traylon jerked to the side as the floating form dissolved, and in its place was a massive beast with 6 heads and glowing red eyes. He called to his dragon as he swung over the side of the cart and into the water. When he emerged, he was in his dragon form, prepared to fight. His head snapped around at the sound of giggles. The gold figure of the woman was once again sitting in the cart, this time where he and Zoran had been. She waved her hand, and all the bars moved back into place. Trick or treat, Traylon Rykill, she whispered, before she and the carts disappeared as if they had never been there. Traylon? Zoran called from the bank, drawing his attention. Traylon turned back to glance at Zoran, who stood waiting for him. He moved through the shallow river to the bank. Digging his claws into the rocky surface, he pulled himself out. Once he was on dry land, he turned to look once more at where the woman and the carts had been before he shifted. What was that? Zoran demanded. And where did the carts go? Traylon ran his hand through his wet hair and glared at his older brother. He was getting tired of everyone asking him what was going on. Just because his mate created this didn't mean he understood any of it. That was why he had placed the damn tracking device on her in the first place, so he could find out. Where are the others? He asked instead. They are trying to round up the younglings before the women discover they are missing. I wonder if Abby will believe me if I tell her I was following Zohar if she catches me, Zoran replied with a grin, before he shook his head. Probably not. She knows me too well. Let's go find the kids. I think I've had enough of this Halloween, Traylon muttered, as he glanced back at where the empty tracks stood in the glow of the now storm-free ceiling.